Lyle and Eric Menendez, the thought that existed for a little while this year, maybe they'll be out by Thanksgiving. That clearly did not happen. And Christmas is not in the cards as well. In fact, we're going all the way to January 30th and 31st for the resentencing hearing that is going to be taking place out in Los Angeles. New district attorney coming in, Nathan Hotchman, wants to review the case. The previous outgoing AG said, yep, we think this should be ready for him to go or ready for them to go. But now they're going to take a little bit longer look at this. Joining me to discuss, Shavaun Scott, psychotherapist and author. We always knew there was going to be some hoops to jump through on this, but psychologically speaking, for these brothers, after all they've gone through, you think they're stressed out about this, or is this kind of another, bump in the road for a life that's already been been a nightmare?
Yeah, yeah. My guess is after what, 30, 35 years that they've probably developed quite a capacity for rolling with it
Yeah.
at this point. Yeah, they may not have had their hopes real high, but I think the rest of us are eager to kind of move on with it and have them because they have spent a lot of time
Yeah, I would
there.
guess that they've developed some coping skills over the years
Coping skills for it.
on
Yep.
how to deal with all of this. But let's talk about the case itself and why, in fact, they are up here for parole after all these years. The Innocence Project taking on their case, helping to push that forward. When we look at the details of this, going all the way back to the allegations of abuse from Jose Menendez, and of course now we also have the accusations from the Menudo member Roy Rosillo. It's pretty safe to say that Jose was not a great dad, from what we can understand. That's putting it probably lightly. Probably more like a serial abuser, if we were to
Yeah.
guess on this. Um, it's interesting because we're talking like 30 years ago, not ancient history.
Mhm.
Why do we have such a different view on this now? Why, when we look at this and we shine the flashlight on it, it looks like a totally different case today than it did back then. And yet most of the facts are still pretty much the same.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I was a young therapist at the time, and I was actually working with women at a sexual assault crisis center
Hmm.
back in the 90s. And we just didn't see a lot of young men or boys coming forward and talking about molest, although we certainly now understand, looking at all the data, that it was happening, but it was kept secret, it was hidden. And we were serving, occasionally we'd get a male client, but it was almost always female clients. And I think since then society has just progressed a lot with being able to understand that abuse doesn't just happen to females, it happens to males too. And when it gets into sexual abuse, there has always, I think, historically been a lot more. The revelations from the Catholic Church and abuse by priests. And, there's just been a huge shift since then with people coming out and talking about it, which is wonderful that we can acknowledge the truth now.
Why was it like that? Why were we so afraid to talk about it with men? And obviously, I get, if you're an adult and all that, you're a male, you don't want to talk. Nobody wants to talk about this, no
Yeah,
matter what, male or
yeah.
female. But obviously, it happens. But were boys just being ignored? Pretty much. Was it one of those things? 'Cause I'm trying to understand this. If you came to an adult and you were a child in that time period, were boys dismissed more than women on this? Of it's just this or that, always coming up with some sort of an excuse. I guess, why were they not taken seriously? Was it because there was just so many adult males who would then also have to maybe face the reality of what they went through as well, and that kind of reckoning? If they accepted it over there with the newer generation, they'd have to reckon it with their own generation. Is that part of what was going on?
It sure could be. The other thing that comes to mind speculating is that there was an added layer of shame around homosexuality,
Hmm.
which is of course now much more embraced to see
Yeah.
gay weddings and people are
Yeah.
very open about their sexual preferences. It's not judged, but boys are most often molested by adult males
Yeah.
most of the time. Um, females are most often molested by males. And so I think when you added that layer in of it was, the same sex molestation, that there was an added layer of shame about it, where people just didn't want to acknowledge it, that it even happened. They didn't want to talk about it. And even with boys and girls, I know in my family history, there was a lot of sexual molestation of grandmother and aunts and things like that. And it was still very much swept under the rug and not talked about. It was just, well, avoid Uncle Bill or, whatever, but it wasn't ever reported. It wasn't, criminalized. And it just seems like over time we've become much more aware of things that adults can do to children that deserve consequences that are horrible.
Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Bruschi, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.